Greenlee, the podcasting legend, is here on our show for the third time now, and Rob Greenlee has watched podcasting reinvent itself from downloadable audio to YouTube, live streams, AI voices, creator empires, and he believes that many podcasters are still following some shady advice that perhaps quietly guarantees failure. We're here to talk about it on the Marketer of the Day podcast with Robert Plank. We are brought to you by dfypodcast.com, where we handle editing, publishing, and promotion so you can focus on conversations that build authority, relationships, and trust. And today we might be hearing about some podcasting hot takes, right? AI can now imitate so much expertise, confidence, emotion, personality, and there's always just so many choices, options, right? Where do I host my podcast? What do I do if I've got to 100 episodes? Like, what should I pivot and change? 1.5 million questions. But Mr. Rob Greenlee, who he has worked with Spreaker, he has worked with Libsyn, he's done so much with StreamYard and Trust Factor Lab. He's here to tell us about where to get some encouragement and some motivation with podcasting. We got also to change the world in our own little way and do a few things right. So, Mr. Rob Greenlee, how have you been?
I've been doing fantastic, Robert. It's great to be back on your show again. It's always good to jump back on and kind of update and renew conversations that have evolved and changed over the span of time. So things are always evolving and improving, and I'm always learning. So there's always something new to share.
Oh, yes. Constant curiosity, especially where AI has a new innovation every day. And you just now gave me a flashback to so many years ago. It might even have been like 9 years ago. You were talking about like injectable ads in Libsyn or Spreaker, maybe even both, right? This idea that
I was in Spreaker, yeah.
Back so many years ago, right? And just that idea that, well, when people think about like an ad or sponsorship on a podcast, they think about like Howard Stern, just like reading it right there and it's locked into that show. But this idea that you can like, drop it in and take it out, and it can be based on if someone pays monthly, or you can change hundreds, thousands of episodes instantly. Just such a cool idea, injectable ads. And you've innovated in so many ways with podcasting in those facets, haven't you?
Well, and now it's just common, right? It's not something that's new or even seen as somehow innovative now. And so now we've moved on to other topics around more streaming stuff, which actually takes us back into a earlier era of online digital content distribution, which all this started really in a lot of ways started in the streaming realm. And then we shifted over to a period of time when we were really focused on downloads. And that was really done for very different environment than what we see today, which, we all have, fast bandwidth that's available everywhere and we can get it any time. So we don't really have to have this download model anymore. So now we're shifting back to streaming again. And so, and now it's going to be streaming video. That's the big thing. That's the whole podcasting industry, and more broadly, the whole content media industry is becoming more and more focused on streaming capability to deliver content, because that also gives access to deeper metrics and understandings of audiences and helps creators hopefully make better content, and also has better insights into who's listening and how long are they listening and maybe where are they listening from. And there's just a lot of capabilities that streaming brings to the ecosystem of content creation and distribution that I think a lot of advertisers have wanted, a lot of content creators have wanted, and a lot of I don't know if all the distribution platforms have wanted that necessarily, especially on the podcasting side, but they're all being forced into it because a big player like Apple decided, well, we're going to support streaming video now. So, and then everybody just scrambles to build that capability. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny to hear you talk about it that way, because it's it's like there's the ebb and flow, and you think about that in computing terms, right? There's always the local and then the cloud computing, and it goes back and forth, right?
Yep.
And then like, oh, now
Yep.
it's back to cloud, and then that's back to, well, private AI, and then it goes back and forth. And it seems like with podcasting, it's a similar idea, right? That, I mean, you think
Yep.
about how many old Facebook lives or Clubhouse streams that were done, but they're just kind of, I guess you might be able to find them in some low quality, but they're kind of gone forever. And you hope that with podcasting, it means something over time, right? That you can maybe like record that stream and then repurpose it so that way someone can find it on Apple Podcasts and YouTube, and they can find the written form. And you hope that as it goes back and forth and as it evolves, it's like, okay, well, the good content you make won't be lost over time, and it can, it can add to your body of knowledge, or with the AI SEO, you can be more discoverable. So we're hoping that as the internet becomes less Wild West, then the content you create maybe becomes like more permanent and findable, maybe.
Well, I would hope so. I think one of the big discussions that's been going on for many years is what exactly is the permanency of the content that we're creating, and is it really going to last? If you think about memory and storage and things like that, there's a cost to that. There's hardware and equipment that has expense that people have to invest in, and there's so much content being created now. Just a terrific example of that is what's going on with Facebook, where they are only going to hold on to your video content for, I don't know, I think it's like 60 days, and then they delete it. So there's trend lines that are pointing to a lack of permanency or sustainability of content that's created online. I think a lot of people have been fearful that you create something and you publish it online and it's going to follow you the rest of your life. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I do think that on a platform like a YouTube, it certainly can do that. I think there's more evidence that content that's published to YouTube has more permanency than pretty much any other platform. And that's an interesting dynamic that I don't know that a lot of people think about, right? Is their storage of their content, the accessibility of it, and then you layer into this AI. Is AI going to have a vested interest in holding on to data about media that was created, or are they just going to take the transcript and take the information out of it, and that's what gets stored? Or are they going to increasingly store the actual video itself or the audio itself? But that takes up a lot of storage and costs. So there's a lot of elements that are kind of behind the scenes that don't get really talked about very much. And I think that is one of them.
Yeah, and it's a little scary, right? Because you wonder if the AI at some point will have some kind of algorithm and say, well, hey, Rob and Robert recorded this video together, and that was 20 years ago, and there haven't really been any views in the past 2 years, so let's just get rid of it. Or like I read something the other day that some of these AI companies, they're taking old books, like maybe like out of print, limited edition, and they have these machines that just like cut the pages out and scan them, but then it like destroys the book because it's like, reading.
No reason to have it.
Yeah, and then it's like, yeah, but it existed on a shelf beforehand, and then it literally like ate it up. And now this book that maybe that was one of 10 copies remaining, or maybe the last copy, well, it's a bunch of vectors of probabilities somewhere in a server farm. So there it goes, and who knows how you can even access it now. So it's this kind of a weird, like, no one saw this coming, I don't think, right? Just how information gets twisted and turned in all kinds of weird ways.
Yeah, and I don't know how AI is going to shift this conversation either. I mean, it's, there's so much expense in running AI, and memory is a huge vector. I don't know if you're following how much, hardware memory costs have just exploded. It's very costly to create like a computer or a storage environment that has a lot of memory now. So, in a lot of ways, we're disincentivizing people to hold on to content for a long period of time. And how do you store content? It's not like the old days when you had like a reel-to-reel you know, 8mm video, and then you had cassette tapes, and then you had CDs and things like that, where you could store, you know, your memories, your family memories. Now it's like, you know, it's USB sticks, and it's cloud storage, but all that costs money, right? So, and the more you gather, the more expensive it becomes. And so, you know, this is a factor for content creators too. Is it, how do you store all this media that you're creating, and would you ever use it again? That's the other part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you use it again? And nothing really is permanent, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
that old hard drive that you have it stored on. It's like, well, who knows if you have you plugged that in recently, and is that still working? And then there was a whole movement on like physical media, right? People don't like
Yep.
that their movies are streamed. They say, well, I've got all these stacks of CDs and DVDs, but even those 30 years later, some of the CDs and DVDs themselves come apart, and those reel to reel tapes, those decay. So it's like, geez, it all just
Nothing is permanent.
yeah,
And
it all just falls
that's
with the
thing.
cruelness of
Right.
time. What the heck?
Right. So, you know, being worried about things that you create in a digital form lasting and following you forever is probably not a well-funded or well-founded worry.
Right.
So it's probably going to go away at some point, because I mean, after you pass away, is anybody going to care? Right. You know,
Yeah, maybe not. That's the saying. In 100 years, who will even remember you?
Right, exactly. And then also, you know, maybe it's your family, maybe it's your kids or something like that that wants to archive you, or maybe we create a artificial agent for each of our passed away loved ones, and we use that data library to build a virtual replacement for them in your life, right? So there could be a use case for all this media. I know I've got like 22 years of or more of content that I've created, but I don't even know how to get access to it all. So, and I ask, you know, the AI platforms what they know about me, and it's really very limited. So it's like, you know, I would like to build, you know, an AI that would be able to talk to me like my father or something like that after he passes away, or my mother or something like that, to be able to spend time with them after they're gone. So that would be a good use case for all this stuff. And I can see that even for myself. I mean, like I said, I've got 20 years of media content, and AI could be trained pretty well to represent me, but it wouldn't get into, I mean, unless I was able to upload all my personal memories up to this agent, it would be very superficial to business conversations.
Oh yeah, it'd still be like a facsimile there, and then there's that fear of like, okay, well then who would care? And so I guess that tells me that it's important to look into how to stay relevant and keep reinventing yourself, because I mean, and it's great that you had like this 22 years, but then you always hear those guys that say like, oh, I've been in business for 40 years, or I have 50 years experience of that, and it makes them seem like kind of like a has-been, right? Like, well, I won this 1991 award in this magazine. It's like, well, what have you done recently? And so I guess if we're clinging to so much of that archival past, maybe it's important to do new things. And that's a lesson for us all. And so in that respect, like, what's is new with podcasting, or what's new with you and your companies?
Well, I've been shifting more towards this concept of looking at media much more broadly, and looking at media, online media, as a human layer that's vectored by trust, and how, as humans, we can hold on to trust relationships. And you know, podcasting and online media has always been an opportunity to be more real, more authentic, be honest, be more capable of building kind of like more of a conversation that's two-way, versus how media has been historically, which has been pretty much just a one-way type of pathway, right? It's the broadcast mentality, right? I'm going to put it out to everybody, but be able to create more of a community, more of a conversation. And that's kind of the direction I'm going with my work now. I spent many years working at podcast hosting companies, which was a very, blast it out to people type of an approach. And but the market is shifting to create more community conversations between listeners and creators. And a lot of ways we're shifting. We could be potentially shifting towards an era where there's a lot of interactivity between the creator and the audience, and the audience starts taking a bigger role in that community, because it may be, and I think we've seen evidence of this, that the interaction of the community inside of the justification for getting together, which is the show, is actually more valuable to the audience than maybe the host. So at the end of the day, the host just becomes a facilitator, right? But that facilitator needs to have skills and abilities and talent and thought processes that can be brought to bear, that is helpful to the community. And you're more of a facilitator. And I think that may be the era that we're heading into more and more. It's not so much about what I think, it's about what I think that facilitates other people and what they're thinking.
Oh, nice. And it's so important to ask these deep questions, right? Because it's like, I mean, you do all this podcast hosting and things change so much. And it's like, if you wait until someone else innovates, then you're playing catch up. So it's important to make these experiments and try these things out and try to go where the hockey puck will be. So that way you're the leader and you're not just playing catch up. And so when you talk about this whole idea of like the community, becomes an important factor, or maybe even eclipses the show. Like, you make me think about, like, so much of my enjoyment from like watching TV, especially like the mystery box shows, is I go online and like between episodes, like talk about theories, and then it works my imagination the same way reading does, right? Because like TV watching, like you say, it's one way, it's very passive, but then you go and theorize, and it excites so much, and you talk to people, and it's really cool. But then you think, okay, well, how does that translate to like a business making money? Because you think like, okay, you see these, like you see the upper crust of podcasting, right? Like a Joe Rogan is always the cliche, right? Or Tim Ferriss, they say stuff and there's just like millions of fans. But for the rest of us saying like, well, I just want to have a business, I just want to have a livelihood, make money. Like, what does all these big ideas mean for us average people?
Yeah, it's a time that we're in. I mean, I think what we all have to do is we just have to back up and think about, well, why is Joe Rogan so popular, and why is Tim Ferriss reach success, and why is like a Stephen Bartlett or something like that reaching rapid growth and things like that? What is he doing that facilitates that type of relationship with audiences? Because obviously it's those people are making it work, right? But it's not everybody can achieve that same level of success, because that's just not how the world works. I would like to think that anybody could do what they've been able to accomplish, but that may not be realistic. But there may be some close facsimile to that, right? That each of us can achieve, that would be more appropriate to what our goals are. And so that's really in a lot of ways the thinking that I'm going through right now with what I'm doing. And I don't have all the answers here. I'm just trying to look at what we see in the market right now with AI and how much distrust there is around AI, but yet everybody's using it and wanting to learn how it works. But yet publicly, a lot of people say that they don't trust AI and they hate AI content, but yet a lot of those people are actively involved in doing those type of things. And everybody's trying to figure out, well, how can I, navigate this? How can I, embrace AI? Because everybody's telling me if I don't, then I'm going to lose my career. But at the same time, I can't do it too much, because then people are going to hate me because they think I'm pro AI. So we have this, and it's very much like politics, right? I mean, if you're on one side or the other of this and you put that out there, there's one side or the other is going to give you a hard time about it. So
Yeah.
that's the struggle that we have in the market. And at the core of all that is human interactive trust. And can you foster that? Can you develop that? Can you hold on to it somehow and not lose yourself in the struggle, and not take extreme sides? And so much pressure for us to go all in on one side and take a very divisive position on these things. And that also puts us in a distrusting situation with half the people out there.
Right. So it's such a mixed bag, right? So much to
Yes, it's
navigate.
hard. It's really
Yeah.
hard to navigate because we've created this very complex environment for ourselves. And it all comes back to, it's all because of the internet, right? We have put ourselves into a world where everybody can share all their thoughts, and people are feeling like they have to take sides. So
Yeah. And that's what gets attention. If you're wishy-washy,
it
then
does.
you're not saying much, but then you're kind of taking a risk. Am I taking the correct risk? And so
Yeah,
what I'm getting,
or you're pissing off everybody.
yeah, that you could really royally screw it up if you go
Yeah,
about it
right,
in the wrong path. But what I'm getting from you is,
right.
you keep saying this keyword trust, and for me, trust means consistency, right? It means like kind of always staying
Yeah, you're
curious and learning, and
always
like
there. Right.
looking at the Stephen Bartletts and being like, okay, like what I don't want to copy, but like what do I think he's doing right? And then keep on consistently putting out your own experiments. That way you have something to say, and that way you can get some kind of measurable results. And so it's so fascinating, and we keep on falling into like the deep psychology of it, which is okay, but then like I get lost in it sometimes, right? It's like when you have these
Yeah.
conversations about AI and the future, I'm just like, oh, it excites me, but then I worry like, well, will I be able to put it to use? And it's just like I go so back and forth with it. But in these final minutes of our conversation, like
Yeah.
you've seen so much, you've done so much, you're working on things such as Trust Factor Lab and the new media show. Like I'm always curious about the missing question, right? Because with podcasting, it's like I like having the window, right? I like having like the few minutes with the person, so that way there's just enough where someone hears about Mr. Rob Greenlee, they want to go and check out more things. But then the downside of that small window is maybe I didn't ask just the right question. So I'm always curious about that missing question that I should be asking you. I just don't know what to ask you. So what do you think I should be asking you in this moment?
Well, I think one other big part of my efforts over the last few years has been leading the Podcast Hall of Fame. So, which is more of a legacy or recognition platform, not unlike the Baseball Hall of Fame or the NFL Hall of Fame or anything like that. It's having a perspective in the market that recognizes significant contributions to podcasting, right? And so that's something that I've been leading for the last 3 or 4 years now, and I'm also in the Podcast Hall of Fame myself, and so actively working on trying to elevate that event to recognize people all over the world that have made big, significant, impactful contributions to the growth of this medium that's become a global phenomenon that touches hundreds of millions of people, maybe billions of people every day. And so that's my other passion that I have, that I've got a lot of different projects that I'm working on. And so that's probably the other biggest one. And that's at podcasthall.com if you wanted to check it out.
And I'm curious about that podcast Hall of Fame because like there's, guys like John Lee Dumas or Dave Ramsey, like we all know them, but when you quantify like what they have contributed, like what have these guys contributed to podcasting?
Well, I think it's in a lot of cases, it's creating environments where others can be successful, right? And to foster education, foster help, sharing of ideas, all these things impact other people. And that really gets back to what I was talking about earlier about this era of community contribution and community engagement. And the Hall of Fame, in a lot of ways, represents that. Is recognizing people that have had a significant impact and influence over others in the path and the trajectory of the online podcast medium over the span of 20 years that's existed. And increasingly, it's becoming kind of a global recognition thing too, because the impacts of people around the world have had a significant contribution. Now, the early years of podcasting was primarily here in the U.S., so a lot of the people that were recognized up till now have been primarily U.S. People. But now we're shifting into a lot more diversity, a lot more global scope of this, because we're starting to enter an era, at least with the Hall of Fame, that really is an era that is all those things, where it wasn't so much in the early years. So that's why you see the type of people that were in the Hall of Fame in the earlier years, because the Hall of Fame started in 2015. So it's been operating for a while. But anyway, it's all consistent for me around trust and building sustainable communities and applying these concepts to people that have had a big impact on success of the medium of podcasting.
Very good. So that tells me that it's important to help out others, right? You think about, well, what did Mr. Rogers or Mother Teresa or Gandhi or whoever, what did they do? Like they help many people, and it hurts my brain to think about that, right? Like especially like how do you make that something tangible, where it's like helping one person at a time? And there's that podcasting cliche of, well, if your podcast gets 100 downloads, you might not think that's a lot. You think like in terms of like, oh, 100 clicks, 100 impressions. But if you looked at a picture of what 100 people in a room look like, it's like those are all 100 people that like they listen to. It's not just a click. It's like they listen to the whole thing. That's 100 big fans. That's more encouraging, that idea of going into like the macro and the micro instead of the macro. Like, how do I help a small number of people in like a niche way versus trying to change the whole world? Like, help the people that you can. It's a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a vector on popularity or anything like that. It's more of a vector on attitude, and it's a vector on how other people perceive you and your impacts. That distinction between impacting 100 people or impacting 1 million people is not a vector of the Hall of Fame. It's more about the attitude and the infectious nature of it, or just flat out great ideas that were ahead of its time. Like we inducted the first digital director of National Public Radio, that was the one that that spearheaded the beginning of National Public Radio becoming a podcasting company. So it had that vision. So it also is about vision. It's about leadership. It's about vision. It's also about starting a project or a direction that ultimately did impact a lot of people. And that doesn't mean that during that time frame when that person did that, it had a huge impact. It could have been like a domino effect of sorts, right? Where it just exploded into something over time, and you just think back and you're just like, wow, how did this person do that? It was amazing, that they were able to accomplish that back at that time when most people had no idea, right?
Right. And they faced quite a lot more of an uphill climb, as opposed to now you just get a camera, click a button. Like they had to, and then even the radio infrastructure didn't exist. So it's like, it's amazing that people got anything done back then, and we take a lot for granted now.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a very popular medium back then. I can tell you that myself personally, because I started a podcast when I was back in 2004, but I was on the radio since 1999. So for me, it was streaming over radio platforms prior to podcasting. Podcasting at that time was like nothing, but it was like an upstart thing. It was like something new, and people were starting to get energized by it. And that's how I wound up getting in the Hall of Fame, is because I embraced it early.
Yeah. So it's important to have those experiments and have fun and try new things, and you never know what it will lead to. And so if someone says, man, this guy, Rob Greenlee, he's got so many ideas and I want to check out more of what he's talking about, his his shows, his company, podcast, Hall of Fame, etc. What are some next steps here?
Well, I've got all this stuff up on my website at, my main one is robgreenlee.com. And then there's Podcast Hall, which is where the Podcast Hall of Fame is. And then there's my 14-year running audio and video podcast that I've been doing. It's at newmediashow.com. You can check that out, and you can see a lot of the conversations that I have up there about, what the future of this medium looks like, where we are today, and the direction that it's going, which is always changing.
Oh yeah, but that's what makes it interesting, right? If we knew where it was headed, then we'd be bored. If it was easy, everyone would do it. So we have to challenge ourselves and embrace the silliness and the chaos, and take some action and see what happens. And so you can check out those shows. That's newmediashow.com, robgreenlee.com, and podcasthall.com, and to check out that Podcast Hall of Fame. And when I end these episodes, Mr. Rob, I like to kind of try to stump my guests a little bit, put them on the spot by asking about a fun or interesting quote or lesson that has served them. So what comes to mind for you as far as a fun or interesting quote or lesson?
I think that the biggest takeaway lesson is to think about others as much as you can, and what their needs are, and ask good quality questions of other people that really gets to the heart of what is important to them. But it also be fair to yourself and share what's important to you too. And so it's having this fair conversation with other people, and really embracing differences, not so much pushing back on those differences too hard. I think that, I think we're all human, and we all have our emotional reactions to things. But if you can temper that a little bit and trying to understand where another person is coming from, and realize that that's valid for them. It may not be valid for you, but it's valid for them, and it deserves to be respected, and attempted to be understood, because that's how we're going to make a better world together.
Empathy and understanding. What a concept, right? And it applies to all kinds of layers. There's the podcasting layer, business layer, and then personal life, being a decent human being in general. And so you can find out more about everything Mr. Rob Greenlee has been up to and is up to. That's robgreenlee.com and newmediashow.com and podcasthall.com. As usual, you delivered the goods, as they say, Mr. Rob, and it's been quite a fun conversation and education about podcasting. And thanks for doing what you do.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Robert, for taking time out to have me on your show again. So I appreciate it, and good luck to you, and good luck to everybody out there that's watching.